When you think of World War II, you probably picture tanks rolling across fields, soldiers storming beaches, and generals huddled over maps. But what if I told you the real war wasn't just fought with weapons? It was fought with money, factories, fuel, and supply chains. Today, we read diving into the hidden force that shaped every victory and every defeat, the economics of the Second World War. This wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a battle of budgets, and the outcome was decided long before the first shot was fired. Before the war even began, the world was still reeling from the Great Depression. Nations were exhausted, bankrupt, and desperate, but how they used that desperation changed everything. Germany poured every resource into rearmament, transforming its economy into a machine designed for rapid conquest. Factories that made civilian goods were converted into weapons workshops. Highways were built specifically to move troops. But here's the catch: Germany couldn't afford it. The country lacked the money, metals, and fuel for a long war. So the Nazi strategy was brutal and simple: conquer fast, seize resources, and use the spoils of one invasion to pay for the next. Japan faced a similar problem. Its growing empire depended heavily on imported oil and steel. The Japanese military knew that without new sources of these critical resources, their ambitions would collapse. So their decision to go to war wasn't just about territory. It was about economic survival. Every move into East Asia was a calculated acquisition for their supply chain. And then there was Italy. Under Mussolini, it was a nation with more ambition than ability. Its economy was small and underdeveloped, completely incapable of supporting a large-scale war. Italy essentially gambled on Germany's strength to cover its own economic weaknesses. But what about the Soviet Union? A country with vast land, massive manpower, and enormous natural resources, but its industry was disorganized. Stalin spent the 1930s forcing the nation through a brutal and rapid industrialization, turning farms into factories and villages into production hubs. It was a cruel process, but it worked. By the time Germany invaded, the USSR wasn't just a nation fighting for its life. It was a gigantic, mobile factory, capable of dismantling entire industries, moving them thousands of miles inland away from the front lines and rebuilding them under fire. This incredible feat of industrial resilience would prove decisive. However, the real economic superpower of the war wasn't in Europe or Asia. It was sleeping across the Atlantic. The United States. Before the war, America was still climbing out of the Depression, but it had something no other nation possessed: scale. Unmatched industrial capacity, endless access to steel, oil, and farmland, and capital on a level the world had never seen. When the U.S. finally entered the war, it didn't just join the fight. It transformed it. Factories that once made cars started pumping out tanks by the thousands. Shipyards were launching new vessels faster than German U-boats could sink them. In fact, America produced more aircraft during the war than all the Axis nations combined. This wasn't luck. It was pure economics. The Allies didn't win just because they were braver or had better generals. They won because they could outproduce, outspend, and outlast the enemy. Germany built magnificent tanks, but they were complex and they couldn't build enough of them. America built simpler tanks, but they built tens of thousands. Japan trained highly skilled pilots, but when they were lost, they couldn't be replaced quickly. America, with its vast resources, trained new pilots in months. The Germans invented groundbreaking weapons like jet fighters and V-2 rockets, but they often ran out of the fuel needed to use them. Meanwhile, America had access to the world's largest oil supply. The war became a contest of logistics, manufacturing, and financial endurance. The nations that ignored their economic limits learned a brutal lesson. You cannot win a modern war without a powerful economy backing you up. Let's look at Germany again. At the height of its conquests, the Nazi war machine looked unstoppable. But internally, its economy was a house of cards. The government was running on stolen gold, seized assets from conquered nations, forced labor, and completely unsustainable spending. They invaded the Soviet Union expecting a quick victory because they knew their economy could not survive a long, drawn-out conflict. When that quick victory never came, the German financial system started to crack. Their oil fields were too small, their factories were vulnerable to bombing, and their supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Even their famous miracle weapons couldn't save them. You can't conquer the world with empty fuel tanks. Japan faced a similar fate. After years of expansion, it still lacked the fundamental resources for a sustained war against an industrial giant. The moment the United States cut off Japan's oil supply, a countdown clock started. It was only a matter of time before the Japanese war machine would grind to a halt. Battles in the Pacific were lost not just because soldiers failed, but because the economy behind them failed first. Ships couldn't sail without fuel, and planes couldn't fly without parts. Meanwhile, the United States became the financial engine of the entire Allied world. Through the Lend-Lease program, America didn't just arm itself, it armed its allies. It supplied weapons, ships, trucks, and food to Britain, China, and even the Soviet Union. In a way, the Allies didn't just win the war. They rented the economy that allowed them to win it. The American dollar and the American factory were as powerful as any army. When the war finally ended, the economic map of the world was completely redrawn. Europe was in ruins. Asia was shattered, but America emerged stronger than ever before. Its factories were booming, its currency was stable, and its financial reserves were overflowing. The U.S. became the undisputed economic leader of the New World Order. The dollar replaced gold as the foundation of global trade. The Marshall Plan, a massive economic aid package, was launched to rebuild Europe. The entire modern financial system we know today was shaped in the aftermath of the war. World War II wasn't just a military turning point, it was an economic revolution. It proved that modern wars are not won on the battlefield alone. They are won in boardrooms, in factories, and in supply depots. They are won by nations that can produce more, move more, and pay for more than their enemies. And that lesson is just as relevant today. True power isn't just about having a strong military. It's about having the economic strength to fund that military, to withstand pressure, to manage a crisis, and to maintain your strength when others are collapsing. Money didn't just influence World War II. Money decided it. If this video helped you see the war from a perspective most people never consider, make sure you subscribe to Legacy of Money. Because history isn't just a collection of stories. It's a record of financial strategy written across time. And once you learn to read it, you'll understand the world in a completely different way. Thanks for watching.